and I'd like to welcome you to lecture number 6 of the LQAS online series that has been produced at the assistance of Juan Carlos Alegre. In this lecture, we're going to compare lot quality assurance sampling, LQAS, with cluster sampling, and specifically comparing it with 30 cluster sampling. The specific objective for this particular lecture, and it should read lecture number 6 here instead of lecture number 5, is to recognize and understand the advantages and disadvantages of LQAS compared with 30 cluster sampling for the purposes of monitoring and evaluating child survival activities. This includes also the use of baseline surveys in this. Let's compare in this slide the uses of LQAS with the uses of cluster sampling. What should be immediately clear from this slide is that we have 2 uses listed for LQAS compared to just one primary use for cluster sampling. I would note that during these comparisons, we're comparing these 2 methods and how they are typically carried out. Now, both LQAS and cluster sampling provide sufficient information to assess coverage or the value of program indicators for the entire program area. However, lot quality assurance sampling provides an additional value of considerable significance, in that it can provide information about how performance varies within the program area. Here we say identify high and low performance at the local level in coverage and quality. This is what we need. So that within the program area we can identify areas needing attention and those that do not need as much attention, so that we can treat areas with unequal performance unequally is what we want. We don't want to provide the same amount of management attention and resources to areas that are performing well within the program area as compared to areas that are performing not as well. 30 cluster sampling does not provide this additional use of looking at and being able to assess performance within the program area. Let me try to give one example with the example of measles immunization coverage. If I carried out a 30 cluster sample survey and included questions about immunization in the survey, I could then calculate the estimate the percent of measles immunization coverage in the program area level. However, I would not be able to say anything about how the coverage varies within the program area. On the other hand, let's take an example of where the program area is divided into 5 supervision areas. In each of the supervision areas, we carry out an LQAS sample. Then at the end of this, I'd be able to merge the information from the 5 supervision areas to estimate the level of measles coverage in the entire program area. However, in addition, I can do something that the cluster sampling can't do. I can then look to see if there are any areas with any of the supervision areas within the program area that have high or low coverage, for example, or low performance, so that maybe the average for the program area masks substantial variation in measles coverage within the program area. If I do identify with this LQAS, then I can shift management resources to those areas requiring more attention because their performance is not as well. In this slide, we compare sampling procedures for LQAS and for cluster sampling. In the typical KPC surveys for child survival projects, we would have a sample of 300 respondents when using the cluster sampling method. In comparison, a typical LQAS survey used for KPC purposes in the child survival projects would have a sample of 95 respondents. In cluster sampling, we go to 30 sites in the program area that are selected randomly within the program area, and we interview 10 respondents at each site, and only the first of the 10 respondents is selected at random. Again, that's for a typical cluster sample survey for the child survival projects, knowing that there are some variation in how these are done. Now, in contrast with lot quality assurance sampling, we randomly select all 19 respondents within each supervision area within the program area. Therefore, if we have, let's say, for example, typically we would have 5 supervision areas, then the total sample size is 5 supervision areas times the 19 respondents per supervision area, or on typical number of respondents is 95 for the whole program area. Now, in contrast to cluster sampling, all the respondents in LQAS survey are selected at random, which means that we may go to 95 sites in a program area, 19 per supervision area and up to 5 supervision areas or more. So we may go to up to 95 sites versus going only to 30 sites in cluster sampling. Okay. Now, it's possible that at one site we might interview 2 or more people in the log quality sampling, but let's assume for the purposes here that on average you go to you interview one person at one person per site within a supervision area. You would go to 19 sites in the supervision area, sample one person, and then that would a total 95 if you went to 5 supervision areas, 19 times each. In this slide we summarize some of the advantages we've discussed before of log quality assurance sampling and cluster sampling, and we discuss a few things we previously have not mentioned. First, both LQAS and cluster sampling have the advantage of being able to assess the confidence interval for coverage, or the confidence interval for indicators at the entire program level, for the whole program area. We can get an estimate of the mean and a confidence interval for our program indicators. Both LQAS and cluster sampling do this.